Close your eyes for a moment. Picture Jesus. You can do it. Everyone can do it. Without any effort, without any research, without any conscious decision, a face appears. Long brown hair, a beard, light skin, tall, thin, blue or green eyes, depending on which painting you grew up seeing. That image is in your head right now. Here is the question nobody asks. Where did that image come from? Not spiritually, not theologically, physically. Where did the specific visual image of Jesus, the one that has been reproduced billions of times across 2,000 years of art, the one that appears in churches and cathedrals and museums and living rooms and hospitals across the entire world, where did that image actually originate? Because here is what we know with certainty. Not a single person alive today has ever seen the face of Jesus. Not a single photograph exists. Not a single painting made during his lifetime survives, if any were ever made. Not a single physical description written by someone who actually saw him has been definitively verified. The image in your head was created by artists who lived between 500 and 1500 years after the death of the man they were painting. And those artists were not working from memory. They were not working from photographs. They were not working from verified historical descriptions. They were working from theology, from tradition, from the political and cultural needs of the institutions that commissioned them. Which means the face of Jesus, the most recognized face in human history, may bear no resemblance whatsoever to the actual face of the man who inspired the world's largest religion. Tonight we find out what that face might actually have looked like. The earliest known Christian art dates to the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, roughly 100 to 200 years after the death of Jesus. What does it show? Not what you expect. The earliest depictions of Jesus in the Roman catacombs, underground burial chambers used by early Christians, show a young man, beardless, with short, curly hair, clean-shaven in the Roman style, sometimes depicted as a shepherd carrying a lamb, sometimes depicted as a young philosopher in a toga. This is not the Jesus of Renaissance painting. This is a young Roman man. And for the first 3 centuries of Christianity, this was the dominant visual representation of Jesus, not the long-haired, bearded, Middle Eastern figure that the world knows today, but a clean-shaven young man who looked indistinguishable from his Roman contemporaries. The shift began in the 4th century, when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire under Constantine. The visual representation of Jesus underwent a dramatic transformation. The clean-shaven young man gave way to a more imposing, authoritative figure, bearded, long-haired, with a presence that communicated power and divinity rather than youth and approachability. This shift was not random, it was deliberate. The image of Jesus was being redesigned to serve the needs of an institution, the imperial church, that needed its central figure to project authority, majesty, and divine power. The face of Jesus became a political tool. What do we actually know, historically, archaeologically, textually, about the physical appearance of Jesus? The answer is very little, and what we do know has been almost entirely ignored in the visual tradition. The canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, contain almost no physical description of Jesus. This is itself remarkable. Ancient biographical writing typically included physical descriptions of its subjects. The Gospels do not. The one passage in the New Testament that might reference the physical appearance of Jesus is in the letter to the Philippians, where Paul writes that Jesus made himself nothing, taking the form of a servant, being made in human likeness. This is theological language, not physical description. The prophet Isaiah, in a passage that Christian tradition has long applied to Jesus, writes of the suffering servant. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. No beauty, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. This is the opposite of every artistic depiction of Jesus produced in the last 1500 years. If this passage refers to Jesus, and many scholars, both ancient and modern, believe it does, then the historical Jesus was not a man of striking physical appearance. He did not stand out in a crowd. He looked, in all probability, like an ordinary Galilean Jewish man of the first century. What did an ordinary Galilean Jewish man of the first century look like? That question has an answer, and it is not what the paintings show. In 2001, a British forensic anthropologist named Richard Neve, who had spent his career reconstructing faces from skeletal remains for criminal investigations, applied his expertise to a different question. What did Jesus actually look like? Neve worked with Israeli archaeologists who provided him with 3 skulls excavated from sites in the Galilee region, skulls belonging to Semitic males from the 1st century AD. Using forensic facial reconstruction techniques, the same techniques used to identify murder victims, he built a 3-dimensional model of what a typical Galilean Jewish man of Jesus' time and place would have looked like. The result was published in Popular Mechanics magazine in 2002 and generated enormous public reaction. The face was dark, darker than any mainstream artistic depiction. The hair was short and tightly curled, not long and flowing. The eyes were dark brown. The features were broad and strong. The overall appearance was of a man who had spent his life working outdoors in a Mediterranean climate, weathered, dark-skinned, physically robust. This was a man who looked, to a 21st century Western viewer, nothing like the Jesus of Christian art. This was a man who looked like what he was, a 1st century Jewish craftsman from Galilee. Neve was careful to note that his reconstruction represented a typical face of the period and region, not specifically Jesus, for whom no skull exists. But the point was made clearly. The man at the center of the world's largest religion almost certainly looked nothing like the image that 2 billion people associate with him. No discussion of the physical appearance of Jesus can avoid the most controversial artifact in Christian history: the Shroud of Turin, a linen cloth, approximately 4 meters long and 1 meter wide, bearing the faint image of a man, front and back, who appears to have been crucified. The cloth is housed in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, and has been the subject of scientific investigation, religious veneration, and fierce controversy for over 6 centuries. The image on the cloth shows a tall man, approximately 5 feet 11 inches, significantly taller than the average 1st century Jewish male. Long hair, a beard, wounds consistent with crucifixion, nail marks in the wrists, wounds in the side, marks consistent with a crown of thorns. The face on the shroud, if it is genuine, is haunting, serene and suffering simultaneously. Unmistakably the face of a man who has died violently. In 1988, radiocarbon dating conducted by 3 independent laboratories dated the cloth to between 1260 and 1390 AD, the medieval period, consistent with the first documented historical reference to the cloth in the 14th century. Case closed, said the skeptics. Medieval forgery. But the story did not end there. Subsequent scientific investigations raised serious questions about the 1988 dating. The samples used for radiocarbon dating, several researchers argued, were taken from a repaired section of the cloth, a patch added in the medieval period, rather than from the original fabric. The dating of the patch, not the original cloth, would explain the medieval result. Further analysis found pollen grains on the cloth from plant species native to the Jerusalem region, found traces of limestone consistent with the specific geological composition of limestone in Jerusalem, found a coin image over one eye consistent with a Pontius Pilate coin minted in Jerusalem in 29 AD. The debate continues. The shroud has never been definitively authenticated. It has never been definitively proven a forgery. What the shroud shows, if it is genuine, is a face, dark, Semitic, bearing wounds, and bearing very little resemblance to the blonde, blue-eyed Christ of Northern European painting. Here is the question that the history of Christian art forces us to ask. If the historical Jesus was a dark-skinned, short-haired, first-century Galilean Jewish man, why does the world's most reproduced image of him show a tall, light-skinned, long-haired man who looks like a Northern European? The answer is not flattering to the institutions involved. As Christianity spread northward and westward through Europe, the face of Jesus was gradually adapted to reflect the appearance of the dominant populations of each region. Byzantine artists gave him Byzantine features. Italian Renaissance painters gave him Italian features. Northern European painters, Dürer, Rembrandt, Rubens, gave him Northern European features. This process was not always conscious. Artists painted what they knew. They used local models. They reflected the visual vocabulary of their own time and place. But in some cases, the process was very conscious indeed. The decision to represent Jesus as light-skinned and European was not religiously neutral. It was theologically loaded. A European Jesus made Christianity feel like a European religion. A white Jesus made the faith of white European colonizers feel natural, ordained, racially coherent. The image was used, deliberately, systematically, with devastating consequences, to support the idea that European civilization was the natural heir of divine favor. The dark-skinned Jewish man from Galilee became, through 15 centuries of artistic transformation, a symbol of European cultural supremacy. That transformation is one of the most consequential acts of image manipulation in human history. There is another source that is almost never consulted in discussions of Jesus' appearance. Jewish sources from the 1st and 2nd centuries. The Talmud contains several references to Jesus, hostile references, written from the perspective of a tradition that rejected his messianic claims, but references that may contain historical information. These references describe Jesus as an ordinary man. No special physical characteristics are mentioned. No unusual height, no striking appearance, no qualities that would make him stand out physically from his contemporaries. This is consistent with the Isaiah passage, consistent with the gospel's silence on his appearance, consistent with the accounts of his arrest, in which Judas had to identify him with a kiss precisely because he did not stand out from the crowd of his followers. A man who did not stand out. A man whose appearance gave no indication of his significance. This is radically different from the figure of Christian art, the man whose face, in artistic tradition, radiates visible divinity, whose appearance communicates his nature before he speaks a word. The historical Jesus, by all available evidence, looked like everyone else around him. That ordinariness, that complete physical unremarkability, is itself theologically significant. It is the incarnation taken seriously. God choosing not to arrive in a body that announced itself. God choosing to be hidden in plain sight. There is a final dimension to this story that is worth sitting with. In the 20th and 21st centuries, as Christianity spread to Africa, Asia, and Latin America, something interesting happened to the face of Jesus. African Christians began painting Jesus as African. Chinese Christians painted him as Chinese. Ethiopian Christians, whose tradition of Christianity is among the oldest in the world, predating European Christianity, had always depicted Jesus as Ethiopian. Darker, more consistent with a Middle Eastern man. These are not distortions of the historical record. In many cases, they are closer to what the historical Jesus probably looked like than the pale-skinned European figure of Western art. And they represent something important, the recognition that the face of Jesus does not belong to any one culture, that the man at the center of the world's largest religion transcends every artistic tradition that has tried to claim him. The real face of Jesus, the actual face of the man who walked through Galilee 2,000 years ago, is lost to history. No photograph, no contemporary portrait, no verified description. What we have instead is something more interesting. 2,000 years of humanity looking at this figure and seeing in his face a reflection of themselves. The most recognized face in human history is a face nobody ever photographed. Nobody ever painted from life. Nobody ever described in enough detail to reconstruct. The face of Jesus exists in the minds of 2 billion people. Vivid, specific, immediately recognizable. And it is almost certainly not the face of the man it represents. What does this mean? It means that what people see when they see Jesus is not a historical record. It is a projection, a collective act of imagination, shaped by centuries of art and theology and culture and politics and need. It means that every person who has ever looked at an image of Jesus and felt something, recognition, comfort, awe, love, was responding not to the historical face of a first-century Jewish man from Galilee, but to a construction, an image built by other human beings, for purposes that were sometimes spiritual and sometimes deeply political. Does that make the response less real? That is a question for each person to answer alone. What we can say is this: the man himself, the actual human being, the carpenter's son from Nazareth, the dark-skinned, short-haired, ordinary-looking man who walked through the villages of Galilee and said things that changed the world, that man has never been fully seen. Not by the painters, not by the theologians, not by the billions of believers who have carried his image through 2,000 years of history. He remains, in the most literal sense, hidden, waiting, perhaps to be found not in any image ever painted, but in the words he actually said. Holy lore. The stories you were told were only the beginning. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week we go deeper into the history that the official version forgot to finish.